There's a specific moment when it hits them. Not gradually, not gently, but with the force of a collision they never saw coming. The avoidant has been coasting on assumptions, operating from a place of comfortable certainty that you would always be there, that they could always come back, that the door would remain open, no matter how many times they walked through it and then walked away. And then something shifts. Maybe they see you've moved on. Maybe they reach out and you don't respond the way you used to. Maybe they just wake up one morning and the fantasy that they could have you whenever they wanted collapses under the weight of reality. This is the moment. The moment they realize they didn't just create distance, they created permanent loss. You're not waiting anymore. You're not hoping anymore. You're not holding space for their eventual return. You're gone. Actually, truly, irreversibly gone. And the realization doesn't just hurt them, it dismantles them. It tears through every defense mechanism they've carefully constructed and exposes them to a pain so raw and consuming that they don't recognize themselves in it. The regret that follows isn't a quiet sadness or a wistful what if. It's a devastating reckoning that rewrites their understanding of themselves and what they've lost. The avoidant has spent so long managing relationships through control and distance that they've never actually experienced the consequence of losing someone who mattered. They've left before. They've ended things. They've walked away from people who wanted them. But it always felt like their choice, their decision, their power. Even when relationships ended badly, the avoidant could tell themselves they were the one who determined the outcome. They maintained agency. They preserved their sense of being the person who cares less, needs less, loses less. But this is different. You're not someone they decided to leave. You're someone they wanted to keep while simultaneously pushing away. You're someone they took for granted while assuming you'd tolerate it indefinitely. And now you're gone not because the avoidant chose it, but because you did. The power dynamic they relied on has shattered, and they're experiencing loss in a way that strips them of every psychological protection they've ever used. The recognition phase. The moment of recognition doesn't always announce itself clearly. Sometimes it creeps up in small realizations that accumulate until they reach critical mass. The avoidant notices you've stopped checking in. The little updates about your life that you used to share have ceased. Your social media presence shifts in ways that exclude them from your world. You're not angry or hurt in your interactions. You're just absent. Completely, authentically absent. And the avoidant begins to understand that absence isn't a strategy or a phase. It's your new reality. Or sometimes the recognition is sudden and brutal. The avoidant sees you with someone else. Not just casually dating, but genuinely happy with someone who can give you what they couldn't. They watch you laugh with an ease you never had with them because you're not walking on eggshells, not managing someone's fear, not shrinking yourself to accommodate someone's emotional unavailability. The avoidant sees you thriving, and it hits them with devastating clarity. You didn't just survive losing them, you improved, you're better off. The relationship with them was costing you something vital, and now that cost has been lifted. This recognition is crushing because it means they weren't just inadequate, they were actively harmful to your well-being. Sometimes the recognition comes through a direct conversation where you calmly and clearly state that you're done. Not done in the temporary sense, done in the permanent sense. You've processed your feelings, you've healed from the hurt, and you've moved into a place where getting back together isn't even something you're interested in considering. The avoidant listens to you speak with a clarity and strength they've never heard from you before, and they understand that this version of you, this healed, boundaried, self-respecting version, has zero tolerance for their patterns. The person they took for granted has evolved beyond them, and they're being left behind. However it happens, the moment of recognition is characterized by a sickening certainty. The avoidant can't rationalize their way out of it. They can't tell themselves you're just hurt and you'll come around. They can't minimize it or dismiss it or frame it as temporary. They know. In their gut, in their bones, in the sudden drop of their stomach and the tightening of their chest, they know. They've lost you. Not in the abstract future sense. Right now. Already. It's done. And the knowledge tears through them like nothing they've experienced before. The immediate devastation. The moments immediately following the recognition are characterized by a kind of emotional freefall the avoidant has never allowed themselves to experience. Their carefully maintained composure fractures. The detachment they've perfected for years becomes impossible to maintain. They feel everything they've been suppressing, and the intensity is overwhelming. Panic rises in their throat. Their chest feels tight, constricted, like they can't get enough air. Their mind races through scenarios, desperate attempts to undo what's been done, frantic calculations about whether there's any way to fix this. The avoidant's first instinct is often to reach out immediately, not with the casual, cool messages they've sent before. With desperate, unfiltered emotion, they usually find pathetic in others. They want to call you right now and say everything they couldn't say before. They want to show up at your door and prove through sheer force of presence that they've changed, that they understand, that they're ready to be different. They want to break through your boundaries with the intensity of their regret. But most of the time, they stop themselves. Not because they don't want to, but because some part of them understands that desperation will only confirm your decision, that their sudden emotional availability now that they've lost you will seem like manipulation or too little too late. The devastation also involves a kind of dissociation. The avoidant feels like they're watching themselves from outside their body. This can't be happening. This isn't how the story was supposed to go. They were supposed to have time. They were supposed to figure themselves out and then come back. They were supposed to have control over the timeline and the outcome. The loss of control, combined with the loss of you, creates a psychological crisis. Their entire framework for understanding relationships has been proven wrong, and they're free-falling through the wreckage of their assumptions. During this phase, the avoidant often experiences physical symptoms. Inability to eat because food tastes like nothing and their stomach is in knots. Inability to sleep because their mind won't stop replaying every mistake, every moment they pushed you away, every chance they had to do things differently. Some avoidants describe feeling physically ill, as if their body is rejecting the reality their mind is trying to process. The devastation isn't just emotional, it's visceral, cellular, a full system breakdown that affects every aspect of their functioning. The regret spiral. Once the initial shock subsides slightly, the avoidant enters a regret spiral that can last weeks, months, sometimes years. This isn't the mild regret of wishing they'd handled something better. This is comprehensive, all-consuming regret that touches every interaction they ever had with you. They replay the relationship like a film they're analyzing frame by frame, seeing now with painful clarity all the ways they failed you, hurt you, took you for granted. Every memory is tainted by the knowledge of what they had and what they destroyed. They regret specific moments with excruciating detail. The time you asked if they saw a future together and they deflected with a joke instead of being honest about their fear. The time you needed emotional support and they offered logical solutions instead of presence. The time you tried to create intimacy and they shut it down with coldness or distance. The time you were vulnerable and they punished you for it by withdrawing. Every single one of these moments plays on repeat, each one revealing another way they sabotage something precious. The avoidant also regrets their entire approach to the relationship. They regret treating you like an option instead of a priority. They regret the tests they put you through, the hoops they made you jump through, the inconsistency they subjected you to while expecting your patience to be infinite. They regret every time they made you feel small or uncertain or not good enough, especially now that they understand you were always more than enough. It was their own inadequacy, their own fear, their own damage that created the problems. What makes the regret particularly torturous is that the avoidant can now see clearly what you are offering them. You weren't trying to trap them or control them or take their freedom. You were offering partnership, support, genuine love that accepted their flaws while still holding space for their growth. You were patient beyond reason. You were understanding beyond what they deserved. You gave them chance after chance to show up differently. And they squandered all of it. They treated your patience like weakness and your love like something they could abuse without consequence. The regret spiral also includes mourning the future that won't happen now. The avoidant starts imagining what life could have been if they hadn't been so afraid, the domestic moments they could have shared, the growth they could have experienced together, the adventures, the comfort, the partnership, all of it crystallizes now that it's impossible. They're mourning not just what was, but what could have been. and the fact that the loss was entirely preventable, entirely their fault, makes the mourning unbearable. The self-hatred emerges. As the regret deepens, it transforms into something darker, profound self-hatred. The avoidant begins to see themselves through your eyes, or what they imagine your eyes must have seen. They see someone emotionally stunted, incapable of basic intimacy, too damaged to sustain healthy connection. They see someone who hurts people who love them, who destroys good things, who chooses fear over everything else, and they hate themselves for it with an intensity that's shocking even to them. The self-hatred is particularly acute because the avoidant can't blame anyone else. They can't make you the villain. You were patient, understanding, accepting. You gave them space when they needed it. You tried to work with their limitations. If anything, you were too good to them, too willing to accommodate dysfunction that should have been deal-breaker behavior. The avoidant is forced to confront the fact that they are the problem, not in a vague, abstract sense, in a concrete, undeniable sense. Their patterns, their fears, their inability to show up emotionally, all of it conspired to destroy something valuable. They hate themselves for being incapable of the vulnerability that relationships require. They watch other people commit easily, express love freely, build healthy partnerships, and they feel fundamentally defective. Why can't they be normal? Why does intimacy trigger such overwhelming fear? Why are they wired in this broken way that prevents them from having what they actually want? The self-hatred is partly about their behavior, but it's more fundamentally about who they are. They don't just hate what they did, they hate what they are. The avoidant also hates themselves for only understanding your value now that you're gone. When you were present, available, trying, they couldn't see it clearly. They minimized you, took you for granted, told themselves they could do better, or that they didn't need anyone anyway. But now, in your absence, they see you with painful clarity. They see how rare you are, how special the connection was, how unlikely they are to find anything close to it again. And they hate themselves for needing to lose you to recognize your worth. What kind of person can't appreciate a gift until it's taken away? The desperate bargaining. After the initial devastation and the descent into self-hatred, many avoidants enter a phase of desperate internal bargaining. They construct elaborate fantasies about how they could fix this. If they just reach out with the perfect message. If they just explain their fear in the right way. If they just demonstrate through specific actions that they've changed. They convince themselves that there must be some combination of words or behaviors that would undo the damage and bring you back. The bargaining often involves promises they make to themselves about who they would be if given another chance. They promise they would go to therapy and actually do the work this time. They promise they would be consistent, emotionally available, fully present. They promise they would appreciate you properly and never take you for granted again. These promises are sincere in the moment, but they're also somewhat delusional because the avoidant is making them from a place of panic rather than genuine readiness for change. They bargain with the universe, with fate, with any higher power that might be listening, if they could just have one more chance, if they could just undo the worst of their mistakes, if they could just make you see that they understand now, that they're different now, that they're finally ready for what they rejected before. The bargaining is painful to witness, even when it's happening internally, privately, where no one can see. It's the avoidant at their most desperate, their most vulnerable, their most human. Some avoidants do reach out during this phase. They send long messages that finally articulate everything they couldn't say before. They apologize with specificity and depth. They explain their fear without using it as excuse. They promise change and offer concrete plans for how they'll achieve it. Sometimes these messages are received and considered. Sometimes they're ignored. Sometimes they arrive too late, after you've already moved on emotionally, and the words that would have meant everything 6 months ago now mean nothing. The outcome varies, but the desperation behind the outreach is universal, the haunting. As time passes, and the avoidant begins to accept that you're not coming back, the regret transforms into something that haunts them. You become the ghost that lives in their mind, the standard against which every future person is measured and found wanting. The avoidant moves through their life carrying your memory like a weight they can't put down. Everything reminds them of you. Everything triggers memories of what they had and what they lost. The haunting is particularly cruel because the avoidant is haunted by their best memories with you. The moments of genuine connection they experienced despite their fear. The times they let their guard down slightly and felt the warmth of real intimacy. The specific ways you laughed or the things you said that made them feel understood. These memories are precious and painful in equal measure. Precious because they represent the best of what they shared. Painful because they represent what the avoidant destroyed through their own inability to sustain vulnerability. They're also haunted by imagined versions of you. The you who moved on and is happy with someone else. The you who thinks of them occasionally with pity or anger or worse, complete indifference. The you who has processed and healed from what they did and is now thriving in ways that have nothing to do with them. These imagined versions torture the avoidant because they underscore how thoroughly they've been left behind, how irrelevant they've become to your story. The haunting affects the avoidant's future relationships in devastating ways. They can't fully show up for new people because they're comparing everyone to you. They can't feel the same depth of connection because they're emotionally still tethered to what they lost. Some avoidants become even more avoidant, using the pain of losing you as evidence that caring too much is dangerous and should be avoided. Others swing in the opposite direction, becoming anxiously attached in new relationships because they're terrified of repeating their mistakes and losing someone else. Years can pass, and the avoidant still carries the regret. It might soften slightly. It might become less acute, but it never fully disappears. You remain the one that got away. The relationship that could have been everything if they'd been brave enough. The person who loved them despite their flaws and who they failed spectacularly. The memory that proves to them that they're capable of feeling deeply, of wanting connection, of being devastated by loss. You're the evidence that contradicts everything they tell themselves about not needing anyone. The transformation question. The ultimate question for the avoidant is whether the regret will transform them or simply torture them. Some avoidants use the devastating loss as a catalyst for genuine change. They finally seek therapy. They do the hard work of understanding their attachment patterns and where they originated. They learn to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. They develop the capacity for vulnerability they lacked. They grow into people capable of the intimacy that terrified them before. The regret becomes the price they paid for wisdom they couldn't have gained any other way. But other avoidants remain stuck in the regret without using it constructively. They wallow in self-hatred without addressing the root causes of their patterns. They replay their mistakes without learning different behaviors. They carry the pain without allowing it to catalyze growth. For these avoidants, losing you becomes just another piece of evidence that they're broken, that relationships don't work, that staying distant was the right approach after all. The regret hardens into bitterness or resignation rather than softening into motivation for change. What determines which path the avoidant takes is often whether they can tolerate the vulnerability that transformation requires. Growth means admitting they were wrong, that they're wounded, that they need help. It means facing the childhood experiences that wired them toward avoidance. It means feeling all the feelings they've spent their life suppressing. It means becoming, at least temporarily, the needy, dependent, emotionally messy person they've always judged. Some avoidants can bear this process. Others find it too threatening to their sense of self and retreat back into familiar patterns, carrying the regret as a permanent scar, rather than allowing it to be a temporary wound that heals into wisdom. The moment the avoidant realizes they've lost you is the moment everything they thought they knew about themselves and relationships gets shattered. The regret that tears them apart is proportional to what they lost, something real, rare, and irreplaceable. Whether that regret destroys them or transforms them depends on choices they make in its aftermath. But what's certain is that they will carry you with them, a ghost that proves they were capable of deeper feeling than they ever admitted, a loss that taught them the cost of fear, a memory that forever divides their life into before and after. You become the person who showed them what they were capable of feeling and what their inability to sustain vulnerability costs. And that lesson, learned through devastating loss, is one they will never forget. The moment the avoidant realizes they've lost you is the moment everything they thought they knew about themselves and relationships gets shattered. The regret that tears them apart is proportional to what they lost, something real, rare, and irreplaceable. Whether that regret destroys them or transforms them depends on choices they make in its aftermath. But what's certain is that they will carry you with them, a ghost that proves they were capable of deeper feeling than they ever admitted, a loss that taught them the cost of fear, a memory that forever divides their life into before and after. You become the person who showed them what they were capable of feeling and what their inability to sustain vulnerability costs. And that lesson, learned through devastating loss, is one they will never forget. The endless replaying. What the avoidant doesn't anticipate is how the regret takes on a life of its own, becoming an obsessive loop their mind can't escape. They replay the relationship constantly, but not in a nostalgic way. They're analyzing, dissecting, searching desperately for the exact moment where things became irreversible. Was it the time they cancelled plans at the last minute? Was it the conversation where they deflected when you asked about the future? Was it the accumulation of 1,000 small rejections rather than one catastrophic event? They're trying to pinpoint the precise instant where they crossed from "could still fix this" to "permanently broken," as if identifying that moment would somehow give them power over it. The replaying becomes a form of self-torture. The avoidant watches their past behavior like they're observing a stranger, except they can feel every emotion that stranger was suppressing. They see themselves responding to your vulnerability with coldness, and they want to reach through time and shake themselves. They watch themselves taking you for granted, and they want to scream at their past self to wake up, to see what they have before it's gone. They observe themselves creating distance, and they understand now that every step backward was a step toward this inevitable loss. The hindsight is perfect and completely useless. This obsessive replaying also extends to imagining alternative timelines. What if they had been honest about their fear instead of hiding behind indifference? What if they had said, "I love you," when they felt it instead of swallowing the words? What if they had fought for the relationship instead of passively letting it die? The avoidant constructs elaborate fantasies about how things could have gone differently, and these fantasies are torture because they highlight just how many opportunities they had to change the outcome. The loss wasn't inevitable. It was constructed through hundreds of choices they made, and they can see now with agonizing clarity how different choices would have led to a different ending. The endless replaying prevents the avoidant from being present in their actual life. They're at work, but mentally reviewing a conversation from 6 months ago. They're with friends, but internally replaying the moment you said you couldn't do this anymore. They're lying in bed, but their mind is trapped in the past, cycling through memories and regrets and what-ifs. The present becomes barely real because the past is so consuming. Time moves forward, but the avoidant is stuck, locked in a psychological loop they can't break free from. The physical manifestation. The regret doesn't stay psychological. It manifests in the avoidant's body in ways they can't control or hide. They lose weight because they forget to eat or food tastes like ash. Or they gain weight because eating becomes a numbing mechanism, a way to fill the void you left. Their sleep patterns disintegrate. They lie awake for hours, mind racing, or they sleep too much, using unconsciousness as escape from the relentless regret. They wake up feeling unrested, carrying the exhaustion of someone who's been fighting a war in their dreams. The avoidant notices physical pain that has no medical explanation. Their chest hurts with a persistent ache that doctors can't diagnose. Their stomach is in constant knots. They get headaches that won't respond to medication. Their body is expressing the grief and regret their mind keeps trying to rationalize away. The pain is real, physical, undeniable. It's their nervous system finally processing the loss they've been trying to intellectualize and minimize. Some avoidants experience panic attacks for the first time in their lives. The realization that they've lost you triggers anxiety so severe it mimics heart attacks. They can't breathe. Their heart races. They feel like they're dying. These attacks come at unpredictable moments, triggered by memories or reminders or sometimes nothing at all. The avoidant, who prided themselves on emotional control, is being controlled by emotions they can't suppress or manage. Their body is rebelling against years of suppression, and the regret is the catalyst that broke the dam. The physical manifestation also includes a restlessness that won't quit. The avoidant can't sit still. They pace. They start projects and abandon them. They rearrange furniture at 3 in the morning. They drive aimlessly, trying to outrun thoughts that follow them everywhere. The energy of regret has nowhere to go, so it expresses through frantic, purposeless activity. They're trying to exhaust themselves into numbness, but it never works. The regret is still there when they stop moving.